A300. It was the first aircraft Airbus ever built and the first twin-engine wide-body in the world. Airbus Industry was formed on December 18, 1970 as a collaboration between French, German, and later British and Spanish partners. Though its name is misleading, the original sketch really was a 300-seater design, but airlines asked for something smaller, so they shrank the design to around 250 seats. The badge stayed because the marketing had already gone out. The A300 first flew on October 28, 1972 and entered service with Air France in May 1974, but then it flopped. Airbus kept building jets it could not sell and had to park them unpainted at Toulouse, the infamous whitetails. The rescue was a gamble by Airbus chief Bernard Lathière. He gave away 4 A300s for free to Eastern Airlines to fly for 6 months, a try-before-you-buy deal aimed at cracking a skeptical American market. Eastern's boss was former Apollo astronaut Frank Borman. Borman took the bet. The aircraft proved cheap to run, so Eastern placed a real order in 1978, and that finally legitimized the plane. Production ran until 2007, with 561 A300s being built, ending as a freighter for FedEx, who still flies the A300 to this day. A310. This was a shortened version of the A300 with a new, more efficient wing, but its career was shorter than its engineering deserved. It was launched in 1978, first flew on the 3rd of April 1982, and entered service with Swissair and Lufthansa in 1983. It seats up to 280 passengers, but the airframe is not the interesting part. The cockpit is. Airbus fitted a modern 2-pilot forward-facing crew station with cathode ray tube displays, and deleted the flight engineers panel entirely. Pilot unions and flight engineers fought it hard, because this was a profession disappearing into software. Still, Airbus won, and the 2-crew wide-body became the standard across the industry. Every airliner cockpit built afterward didn't require a flight engineer. Only 255 units were ever built, but the type found a long second life as the A310 MRTT military tanker and as the European Space Agency's zero-gravity flight aircraft. A320. The A320 is the best-selling airliner in history and the aircraft that made Airbus a genuine rival to Boeing. It was launched in March 1984, first flew on February 22, 1987, and entered service with Air France in 1988. Everything about it was a bet on digital fly-by-wire. There is no control column. Like on the 737, each pilot flies with a side stick beside the outboard hand, and a stack of computers physically refuses to let the crew stall the aircraft or overstress the airframe. Bernard Ziegler pushed that philosophy hardest. He was Airbus's engineering and flight test chief and the son of the company's first CEO. He talked openly about the aircraft protecting its pilots. That irritated a lot of aviators who did not enjoy being told the computer knew better. Those pilot protection claims would not hold up for long. On June 26, 1988, just weeks after entry into service, an Air France A320 flying a low pass at the Habsheim Air Show flew into the trees at the end of the runway and crashed, killing 3 people. The captain survived and blamed the flight control laws and slow engine spool-up. Airbus and the investigators pointed to a flypass flown too low and too slow. The dispute lasted years and damaging the reputation of the A320's electronic systems. The French courts sided with the investigators. Captain Michel Asselin was convicted and given a suspended prison sentence in 1997. Airbus changed nothing fundamental about the fly-by-wire design and stood behind it. The real blame landed on the captain's flying itself, with airlines and regulators tightening the rules on low passes and on carrying passengers during demonstration flights. The A320's cabin is also 7 inches wider than a Boeing 737's, which is why the seats feel different. And in 2016, Airbus launched the A320neo, which introduced new, larger, and more efficient engines. A321. This is the stretched version of the A320, and it quietly became the most important member of the family. It first flew in March 1993 and entered service with Lufthansa in 1994. The fuselage is 22 feet longer than an A320's, and it seats up to 244 people in a single-class layout compared to the A320's 180 passenger limit. The A321neo took over the market, which Boeing abandoned when the 757 ended production. The extreme version is the A321XLR, with a permanent rear center fuel tank built into the fuselage structure, giving it a range of about 4,700 nautical miles and the ability to fly narrow-body transatlantic routes. A319. This is the shortened A320, seating about 140 passengers. It first flew in August 1995 and entered service with Swissair in 1996. Because it carries the same wing and engines as a heavier aircraft, it climbs fast and flies far, which made it the natural base for Airbus to build the corporate jet version. The A319 ACJ adds extra fuel tanks in the cargo hold and turns a regional airliner into a private aircraft with intercontinental range. Several air forces use it as a head-of-state transport. A318. This is the smallest jet Airbus ever built and the least successful member of the family. It first flew in January 2002 and entered service with Frontier Airlines in 2003, but only 80 were delivered. Airlines nicknamed it the Baby Bus. Its one genuine trick was steep approach certification for London City Airport, where British Airways had an all-business class A318 to New York with a fuel stop at Shannon. Commercially, it was kind of a failure, but for a decade, it was the only aircraft Airbus had for airlines that wanted something smaller than the A319. A330. The A330 and A340 were designed as one project, sharing a fuselage and a wing, then split into a twin and a quad. That was a clever way to develop two aircraft for close to the price of one. The A330 first flew on November 2, 1992, and entered service with Air Inter in January 1994. It was built at exactly the moment regulators were relaxing ETOPS rules around long overwater routes, allowing two-engine aircrafts to operate them instead of being limited to 3- and 4-engine aircraft. It outsold and outlived its own four-engine sibling, the A330neo, with Rolls-Royce Trent 7000 engines and A350-derived winglets, first flew in 2017 and entered service with TAP Air Portugal in 2018. The airframe also serves as the A330M RTT tanker for more than a dozen air forces. A340. The A340 was the four-engine long hauler that never got the engine it was designed around. It first flew on October 25, 1991, and entered service in March 1993. The original plan was to have an ultra-efficient turbofan called the Superfan, but that engine was cancelled in 1987, and Airbus was left with no choice but to fit the smaller, less powerful CFM56s. Airlines that ordered on the Superfan's promised numbers received a jet that struggled to take off the ground and burned far more fuel than they were promised. Airbus tried to rework the wings and pylons to make up for the poor engine performance, but the reputation stuck anyway. Pilots and controllers joke that the A330 can't climb, so it waits for the Earth to curve away beneath it. One analyst even called it the only aircraft to suffer bird strikes from behind. The later A340-600 fixed much of the issues with the new Rolls-Royce Trent 500s and stretched the fuselage to 247 feet, briefly making it the longest airliner in the world. The A340-500 held the longest range title and flew Singapore to Newark non-stop for nearly 19 hours. But none of it mattered because the A330 sipped less fuel, was cheaper to operate, and could fly the same routes, which made Airbus end the A340 production in 2011. A380. The A380 is the world's largest passenger airliner ever built and the most expensive lesson Airbus ever paid for. It was launched in December 2000 as the A3XX and first flew on the 27th of April 2005. The wingspan was deliberately sized to fit inside a 262-foot box because that is the standard airport gate limit. Some sections of the aircraft were too big to transport on normal roads or aircraft, so Airbus built a bespoke logistics route through southwest France using barges up the Garonne and a nighttime convoy that widened village streets to let fuselage sections through. Then came the internal wiring disaster. Each aircraft carries roughly 330 miles of wiring, about the distance from London to Paris, with some 98,000 wires and 40,000 connectors. The German and Spanish teams which designed the wiring used an older version of a 3D modeling software, but the French and British teams had moved to a newer version. The two were not properly compatible, and when assembly started in Toulouse, the harnesses were too short to reach their connectors across the whole aircraft. The fix cost more than a year of delay, $6 billion, and the jobs of a few executives. The bigger problem was that the industry was moving on. Airlines abandoned huge hub airports for smaller twin-engine jets flying city to city, and the A380 had to fly nearly full to make money. Emirates cut its order in early 2019, and Airbus ended production days later. Only 251 were built, and Emirates owns 123 of them, with plans to continue flying them into the early 2040s. A350. The first A350 was not the aircraft that exists today. It was a modified A330 with new engines and composite wings, rushed out as an answer to Boeing's 787. And Airbus was slapped in the face when on the 28th of March 2006, in front of a room of airline executives, ILFC leasing chief Stephen Udvar-Hazy called it a band-aid reaction to the 787 and told Airbus to go clean sheet or lose the market. Singapore Airlines CEO added that having already redone the wing, tail, and cockpit, Airbus should have gone the whole hog and designed a new fuselage. Airbus swallowed its pride and started over, returning in July 2006 with a genuinely new, wider aircraft at roughly 3 times the original budget. The finished aircraft is 53% composite by weight, first flew on June 14, 2013, and entered service with Qatar Airways in January 2015. The customer may have single-handedly saved the entire project. A220. The A220 is the only Airbus airliner which Airbus did not design. It began as the Bombardier C series, first flying on September 16, 2013, and entering service with Swiss in 2016. Boeing complained that Bombardier, a Canadian manufacturer, was selling the jet below cost, and the U.S. government proposed import taxes of nearly 300%, which would make the plane way too expensive for anyone to buy in America. So Bombardier's answer was to give Airbus ownership of the aircraft for almost nothing. Airbus then built a second assembly line in the U.S., as jets built inside the United States can't be taxed 300% as imports, so the threat was gone. It is the quietest and most efficient small jet in service, and Airbus got it for free. Airbus Beluga. The A300-600ST Beluga is an A300 with the entire upper fuselage replaced by a cargo bubble, built to fly wings and fuselages between Airbus factories. 5 Belugas were built from 1992 to 1999. The replacement Beluga XL is larger and can transport 30% more cargo than the Beluga. It's based on the A330-200 and entered service in January 2020. Airbus employees voted on the paint scheme, and the winning design put eyes and a smile on the nose. 6 XL variants were built. Thanks for watching. If you want to support me making these types of videos, subscribe to the channel and click on the video that's on screen right now.